कनकं परीक्ष्यते निर्घर्षण छेदन तापताडनैः तथा चतुर्भिः पुरुषः परीक्ष्यते श्रुतेन शीलेन गुणेन कर्मणा. Gold, being one of the most valuable metals on earth, is tested by checking its malleability, ductility, by heating and cutting it into different forms in order to purify and refine it further. It teaches us the very important lesson that as human beings, our integrity is also tested through our conduct, qualities, and actions in order to become a more refined version of ourselves. It is fitting, therefore, that the next session focuses on the growing role of refining in the Indian gold ecosystem and the need for responsible sourcing. I would like to introduce our eminent panelists and invite them to the stage. We have Mr. Vikas Singh, who is the MD and CEO from MMTC PAMP, with his CV spanning over 25 years of rich and impactful experience. Let's please have a round of applause. We have Mr. James Jose, who is the Managing Director, CGR Metalloys Private Limited, Kochi, engaged in the refining of precious metals. Mr. Jose is also the Managing Director of CGR Hallmarkers Private Limited, operating BIS-recognized gold and silver hallmarking centers, the President of Hallmarking Federation of India, among other such prestigious roles. Mr. Haresh Acharya, Director at Parker Precious Metals LLP, and Director of Indian Bullion Jewelers Association. He is an expert in the bullion business since almost 3 decades now. We have Mr. Sudhish Nambiat, who manages the Precious Metals Department of the Dubai Multi-Commodity Center, that is DMCC, and he's also member of the Executive Office of the Emirates Bullion Market Committee. Prior to joining DMCC, Mr. Nambiat was the head of IGPC IIMA for 4 years. And we have Mr. Kamlesh Sharma from IFSCA. He is the General Manager at IFSCA on deputation from the Reserve Bank of India and General Manager and heading the Department of Metals and Commodities. He's an expert on regulatory aspects and banking regulations, among other such related areas. Professor Sahai, Chairperson IGPC, would be moderating this discussion. Let's welcome them all with a round of applause. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone, and welcome everyone on the stage. Mr. Jose, Mr. Singh, Mr. Acharya. Seems a bit strange to be so formal with everyone, but Mr. Kamlesh Sharma, Mr. Nambiat, thank you very much for taking the time. So, I thought I would take around 35-40 minutes of our time to get a sense of some of the issues which are exercising our minds at IGPC in particular, but also more generally for the industry as a whole. So let me start off by asking the largest organized refiner here in the country, which happens to be to lead off the discussion. And my question to Vikas would be essentially to give us a sense of, if I were to ask him, what keeps him awake at night? What is it that from a refining industry or as a CEO of a refiner, the major refiner which is LBMA certified, is it policy uncertainty? Is it lack of transparency? Is it an issue between refiners and bullion traders that stops the flow of gold from what it should be? Or is it between refiners and jewelers? What would you categorize as the top issue for you as a refiner, especially from the perspective of how the gold finally gets to the customer, whether it is the end consumer who buys jewelry or it is the bullion trader or somebody else?
Certainly. So good afternoon, Professor Sahai, and if I may say, Arvind, we
Please.
do away with all the formalities. Good afternoon, fellow panelists and our guests over here, Harish, Som. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor. We worked with IGPC in the past a lot and have very high regard for the way you are able to put all your constructs and your recommendations together. And I look forward to this being another very powerful conversation going forward. I think as a typical business, this industry is different in one clear way, which is volatility. All right. So the predictability of the business and therefore the ability to forecast literally what's going to happen tomorrow is not very high. And if you were to compare it with any of the large industries that we have in the country, any industry, I think this level of volatility is unprecedented. This gets compounded further, and that's what really answers your question in terms of what keeps me awake at night, is the regulatory uncertainty. You can't have an environment where every 6 months, 12 months, you're trying to take a guess on what's going to happen. And when something like that happens, where the implications, given the nature of the trade, which runs into billions of dollars, even a percentage change has implications on a P&L which can leave aside your P&L, your balance sheet. I'll give you a very small number. We were doing our maths. There was huge speculation given and this was mentioned by fellow panelists before, the gray market impact in the country. We were anticipating that maybe there will be a rationalization on the customs duty for sure. GST is another story. You have India sitting at about 18%, 15 plus 3. And all our submissions to the various ministries were that you got New York at 0, 0, 0. You got London at 0, 0, 0. Switzerland, when I say 0, 0, that means customs 0, VAT or GST 0. Switzerland 0, 0. Dubai 0, 0. Singapore 0, 0. Turkey 17, but you need to be amongst those few nominated people who can import, and if you do the gray route, then they break your legs. China, less said the better. Now, in a scenario like this, if we had even a percentage correction in, let's just say, customs duty for a ton of gold, that worked out to almost $1 million. Now, if you're doing a volume which runs into 8-10 times of that amount in a month, and that's 1%, you can imagine there's nothing left. So I think if the industry is more predictable, it is easier for a company to plan in the medium and the long term. There are huge investments which have been made, are being made, will be made. But if you don't have that certainty in the environment, then everyone gets nervous. Then you say, listen, what's the next best place to go to? It may not be as big as India, but maybe that's the direction we take. I believe this is a conversation we need to be able to have in a very engaging, in-person, productive way, with the government. There has to be mutual trust. And at the end of the day, the objective is to try and grow the impact on this journey to the $5 trillion economy or Make in India, or whatever you wish to capture that as the, the rallying cry. I think that's the piece, Arvind, that really has me worried.
So if I may kind of take on that for James and for Vasubhai also over here, would you be on board with what Vikas has just shared with us right now? Regulatory uncertainty is what he's pointing it out, and he's saying that 1% change can lead to $1 million change in my profitability. So maybe Vasubhai, you can start off while the mic is, there you go, you're up, please. पहले आप लोग दोनों लखनऊ के हैं.
Good morning, everybody. The Indian market is really volatile, as Mr. Vikas Singh said, because of when the prices are going up, there's a lot of material coming from the grey market. The grey market itself is not smuggled gold, I would say. In India, we have a household domestic holding of around 30,000 tons of gold. I think in 2015, when the GMS was launched, we were estimating 23,000 tons of domestic holdings. Now, after 8 years, it's something around 30,000 tons of domestic household gold holdings. So at least 5%. 5% is 1,500 tons. At least 5% of the domestic household gold holdings is getting into recirculation depending on the market conditions. So one thing is, of course, because of the regulatory issues or uncertainty in the duties and other things, the official doré imports and the official bullion imports may come to a standstill. On the other side, we have seen the prices going up by 10-15%. So naturally, the supply side is taken care of by the unorganized sector, the household gold holdings. Like if you look at the December scenario, the total imports into India, bullion imports from doré and other doré and finished bullion is 22 tons in December, whereas the quantity of jewelry hallmark, new jewelry hallmark, as per BAS figures, is 90 tons. So around 70 tons of gold was coming from other sectors. So, and we have seen from November, December, January onwards, we have until the budget, we have seen huge discounts, price discounts in the market. So all these refineries which are solely dependent on Dora imports were practically sitting idle. And there are different segments of refining. Like some of the refineries are dependent on domestic scrap, some are dependent on doré. So there is a lot of what you call volatility, uncertainty, and supply side also there are different sources of supply. Like we have seen smuggling going up by 20-30%. Like instead of around 200 tons per annum, it is estimated to be 300 tons. So much more than the smuggled quantity. A lot of domestic holdings is also coming into recirculation. So this is all affecting the bullion, the physical new bullion imports and dollar imports also. When there is a $20 to $40 discount in the market because of these unorganized supplies, definitely dollar imports and bullion imports are impacted. So that is very peculiar. In the years to come, we need to be mentally prepared for that. We have to understand that we are sitting on a domestic holding of 30,000 tons, and at least any point of time, every year 5%, that's 1,500 tons, will be in circulation. Depending on the price conditions, it may be low, it may be going up or coming down. But these bullion imports and dollar imports has to be calculated or seen in that context. Thank you.
So if I can just build on that point a little bit. So what I understand, putting it on top of what was said by MMTC PAMP, is that apart from the regulatory uncertainty, what you are really concerned with from a refiner's perspective is the fact that there is this whole amount of extra gold that is coming into the system, which is partly unaccounted for. And it puts a strain on the system for those people who would like to be able to operate in the number one fashion, as some of our jewelers were talking about. So the concern area for the refiner, therefore, is that as a refiner, one will face some pressures just to be in business, to shift from one side to the other, back and forth. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, that's going to be a regular phenomenon. And I would say all this gold coming from unorganized segment is getting converted to official segment. Like jewelers are buying it. So a jeweler having corporate jeweler having 10 kilo sales, he is getting 8 kilo old gold, and only 2 kilo fresh gold is required.
And so
therefore, refiners are getting prepared.
Apart from the regulatory uncertainty, it's simply the magnitude of the arbitrage that is available,
Exactly.
0.0 versus 15.3.
Yeah.
That is a cause of this issue, which is a problem for refiners,
Yeah.
definitely. Vasubhai?
सर अभी विवेक सर ने बोला है, विकास सर ने, बेसिकली ये जो पीरियड है ना, वो रिफाइनरी इंडस्ट्रीज़ के लिए फ्रस्ट्रेटिंग पीरियड है, क्योंकि हम लोग बहुत मैं 2008 से रिफाइनरी चला रहा था स्मॉल स्केल से, 2017 में मैंने लार्ज स्केल पे उसको किया। मगर ये जो पीरियड में क्या होता है कि जो रियल कोर रिफाइनर है, जो अच्छा काम करने चाहते हैं, जो रेगुलेटरी फॉलो करते हैं, NABL, BSI, RMI, RJC और LBMA या पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल, ये नॉर्मल क्लॉज है जो फॉलो करके अपना एम्प्लॉयज़ वगैरह जो प्रॉपर रखते हैं, उनके लिए ये पीरियड ऐसा गया है हमारा जो लास्ट 3 महीने का, कि जैसे एक सिपा लॉन्च होता है कि 1% डिस्काउंट है, तो वो वहाँ पे फिनिश गुड पे डिस्काउंट है। हमारा जो इंसेंटिव है वो 0.65 है, वो अनफिनिश है, जिसमें हमको रिफाइन करना है, जिसमें हमारा पूरा एक मैकेनिज्म लग रहा है, हमारा एम्प्लॉयमेंट लगता है, हर चीज़ लगती है। और दूसरे जैसे कि इंडिया में अभी 35 रिफाइनर्स हैं, विकास सिंह सर अच्छे से जानते हैं, उसमें से 4-5 लोग ही ऐसे हैं जो रेगुलेटेड वे में बिजनेस करते हैं। बाकी के जो लोग हैं उनका जो इवन एम्प्लॉयमेंट है वो भी कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल बेस पे है। तो एक जैसे कि एक 50 लोगों का टोली है, वो 25 रिफाइनरियाँ में हर जगह जाके रिफाइन करके आता है। तो ये कॉमन लास्ट 10 साल से हो रहा है कि खुद का एम्प्लॉयमेंट भी नहीं रखते हैं, तो वो कोर बुलियन डीलर है, कोर रिफाइनर नहीं है। तो अगर ये इंडस्ट्रीज़ को अगर हम एकदम ऑर्गेनाइज वे पे लेके जाना है या ऑर्गेनाइज वे पे हमको लाना है, तो इसको पहले तो हम प्योर रेगुलेटेड लोगों को इसमें से कैसे इनको इंसेंटिवाइज किया जाए, इनको क्या बेनिफिट दिया जाए, वो सब सोचना पड़ेगा। जैसे आज विकास सिंह का जो बात है वो एकदम सही है कि आज हमको माल लेने में जाते हैं तो वो इंडियन रिफाइनर्स के पास क्या है कि 2 लोगों का 5 लोगों का स्टाफ है, वो कोई भी रेट 2-5 प्रीमियम $10 प्रीमियम दे के भी माल ले लेगा, क्योंकि उनका ओवरहेड एक्सपेंस है ही नहीं। जबकि हम जब रिफाइनरी करते हैं तो हमारा एक फिक्स ओवरहेड एक्सपेंस है, हमारा इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बिल है, हमारा एक पूरा मैकेनिज्म काम करता है, हमारा खुद का फंड भी रहता है। तो वो चीज़ें जो दूसरे रिफाइनर हैं वो उनको ये चीज़ें नहीं हो रही है। तो मेरा मानना है कि अगर इस रिफाइनरी को गवर्नमेंट के पास जाना है तो प्योर जैसे कि OECD कॉम्प्लायंसेस जो फॉलो कर रहे हैं उसके साथ ही रहना पड़ेगा, अदरवाइज ये आगे जाके ये इंडस्ट्रीज डेफिनेटली सही लोगों को बाहर निकाल देगी। मेरा मानना ऐसा है।
वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग। आपने जो बोला उससे ये सवाल उठता है कि आपने 1% और डोरे वाला भी जो 0.65 0.35 वाला मार्जिन बताया, तो दिस इज़ अ क्वेश्चन जो मैं सुधीश से पूछूंगा फ्रॉम अ रिफाइनिंग पर्सपेक्टिव। अगर हम रिस्पॉन्सिबल सोर्सिंग, if there is a way to actually mandate, I'm not sure that we can do that, but perhaps if there is a way to be able to mandate कि a refiner should have some commitment to responsible sourcing और उसका third party independent audit भी होगा, तो what should be that way? What are some risks in this chain which may or may not enable the refiners to handle it without any major disruption in their businesses?
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
You want to do the...
No, my presentation comes on the risk sourcing.
Okay.
Risk aspects. So when we get to that, so on this subject, I look at it in two parts. One is about 0.65%. When you talk about 0.65% differential, we had done a study, if you remember, which clearly shows that 0.3% of the 0.65 is primarily related to the inefficiencies at the government level, when I say at the customs level, in terms of in creating a smooth process for in the supply chain, because the cost related to holding up the sample, the cost is related to clearing the goods, and other than that, there is this cost related to non-availability of financing. So all of these together creates a 0.3% inefficiencies in the market, which is not actually available for the refiners. Think of it in comparison to other global refiners. So of the 0.65, it's only 0.35 which is typically available. Now the next question comes in is, do we still need to have the 0.35%? And is that an incentive, or doesn't that become an incentive for routing any form of gold to the country? Yes, it is, and it is not as well. What happens if the government comes up and says, insists that all the refiners who are given the license to import doré have to mandatorily take up the response sourcing audit, third-party response sourcing. They take the third-party reviewing process, and then they get certified for it. There are various industry programs there available. What if the government says that will be only the refiners who are doing so would be getting this 0.35% or the 0.65% differential at the time of importing? So you are still keeping a market open where one could import at 0% differential without following response sourcing, and one who want to follow it. So I think that would be the best way, because that is where the incentive lies. Give a time period, year and a half for following these practices, and it should work.
Okay. So if I now pick up on the points which were made by James Bose, Vikas Singh, Harish Acharya, yourself, Sudesh Nambiar, and put it to Mr. Kamlesh Sharma. Mr. Kamlesh Sharma not only is part of the regulator IFSCA in Gift City, Gandhinagar, but he also is on deputation from the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank of India traditionally, if you will allow me to say so, has had a somewhat, what would be the right word? suspicious view of gold as a category. But clearly, with the setting up of the bullion exchange, India International Bullion Exchange, trying to move things towards greater transparency, the fact that if a larger amount of gold flows through that, much of that would be refined gold. What would be the view from both hats? The hat of IFSCA, the regulator, and the hat of RBI, the central bank, that has a view on gold. On these issues which are being raised by people from the industry and someone who brings a reporting background from the industry, IGPC exposure, and is right now with DMCC. So what would be your take on this? How would you respond? What would be your concern areas, given that all of us ultimately want the same thing, which is for the industry to grow, to get organized, and be good for everyone?
Thank you so much for having me on this, because I'll start with the disclaimer, because I was expecting this kind of a googly from the professor. So the disclaimer is about, because the professor talked about the two hats. So let me just dwell into this role, because right now I'm on deputation to IFSCA, so definitely I cannot be talking officially on behalf of the Reserve Bank. But in fact, the role of Reserve Bank when it comes to the gold economy and gold markets, even within the Reserve Bank, there are so many other aspects on the entire spectrum of the role, because we'll have our Forex Reserve Managing Department, we call it Department of External Investments and Operations. They are looking at gold as an international asset. What should be the component or proportion of gold we should be holding as part of our Forex reserves? That is one part. Now, what should be the role of the banks, non-banking financial institutions? What should be the credit facilities, and how much of credit should be flowing under what terms and conditions to the gold economy and the gold sector? That comes, say, under the purview of the banking or Department of Regulation now, all banking, non-banking, even cooperative banking. Then when it comes to the operating aspects of FEMA, that how does one import gold, how can one export gold, that is another department called Foreign Exchange Department. So this is just to give a background about the role within the Reserve Bank, that how it will be so different from different perspectives. So I'll come back to that. So while officially I cannot be making any statement, but all I can do is what is in public domain. Please allow me to refer to this 2012-13 working group report, Reserve Bank's own working group report. Dr. K.U.B. Rao had headed that, and I was part of, I was just working with my boss at the time. He was one of the members on the committee. And the report actually went beyond, means it just took a very broad view of the mandate it was given. It was, at the time, a lot of proliferation of the gold loan financing companies, the NBFCs had come up, but it took a broad view. And one of the recommendations, which is very relevant for the question the professor has posed, is about that the committee had actually recommended the consideration or to start thinking about having an independent body, a gold corporation, or some sort of an institution that looks at it. So where I'm coming to is that perhaps there's a need for an integrated, unified policy institution with what I should say, inputs coming in, or the contribution or participation from the fiscal authority, because the whole gamut comes when the policy uncertainty, it broadly revolves around the policy around the revenue side. That what is the view, and when the unofficial channels, official channels. So when Mr. James was talking about that, okay, so much of it is coming through 0-0, but the household gold stock coming into the organized market, maybe from one perspective, it is not a bad thing at all. Perhaps that is one of the policy objectives. So this is that complicated from that side. But when from IFSCA, that is, so that has to be addressed. Means you cannot circumvent that need. I think the crying need for if refining is one of the manufacturing activities, whether we are wanting to promote it, then you can think of PLIs and all. But if the existing capacity itself is not getting utilized and it's getting suffocated or frustrated like what we are hearing, it's really very serious. So we should think of developing the industry, and the outlook should already be export-oriented or international outlook. So this is the bare minimum that we bring the entire activity under the organized sector. We come out with our guidance on the responsible sourcing norms. We have the technical specifications from BIS, and I think BIS and our technical specifications will be second to none in the world because of our inherent competencies. Now, it is about the willingness and the intent about whether we are looking to. If the industry is actually willing to and it is showing intent, I think WGC, the work, we have WGC, IGPC here, if they can show that if like SRO coming up, and if the industry itself actually creates that kind of buzz that we need ourselves to organize, so then definitely it will be it should be taken notice of. That is one part from the domestic side. From IFSCA side, I think that what can be immediately done is this, that we don't carry any baggage there. So when I am wearing that IFSCA hat, what happens is that although it limits the jurisdiction only to that enclave in Gift City that is marked as IFSC, so we have already had that flexibility that we include refining of gold also as one of the financial services. So the IFSCA is one unified regulator there. So as far as apart from the fiscal policy side, IFSC has full view and full, what I should say, the responsibility or the mandate on how do we organize. So if ideally it should be the India Good Delivery Standards with responsible sourcing norms, and all entire regulatory minimum infrastructure should be imposed domestically as well to promote exports, to get the dore, and then we address these, because once the intent is there, I think this 0.3 and 0.35 percentage points, whether we need complete convergence in the duty structure, whether it is refined bars or it is dore, we should be addressing the whole issue holistically. And then the implementation part, the actual part about that, how do you actually control what can be done in Turkey? At least if not you break the legs, at least you make some sort of disincentive and make the law or the law enforcement or implementation a bit more. So that is one very broad area. I perhaps cannot or should not go into that. But under IFSCA, we are now actually, in fact, I have taken Ramki's position here. I had actually wanted him to be here so that he could get into the technicalities of what we are looking to do from IFSC side. But then I thought that the issue is a bit different. So when the pitch was looking different, I nominated myself to play. So this is how it is, and the first question itself is like that. So it remains a conundrum. This is the challenge. I have in my limited tenure as part of the bullion or precious metals work at IFSCA, I have been hearing this, and I think there is a lot of time which has already been wasted, and we all know, everyone seems to know the issues now. So if it is WGC or IGPC, whether we have the capacity to come out with our guidance, then the second stage is the implementation part, where I think someone like Sudhish can also help us that through the association. What UAE has done, that is a bare minimum that India can start doing. So we are looking ahead from IFSCA side, it is a green field. We don't carry any baggage. From the regulatory side, it is in our hands. And very soon, perhaps, we will be able to at least come out with our IFSC good delivery standards, including the norms on the responsible sourcing part.
In fact, to kind of again build on that response, the second part of the response where you're saying from an IFSCA part, there is no baggage and one should be able to build. So for the refining industry, right, if we can grow refining in India without being dependent on dore, is there a business case for refining facility at Gift City? And how important would be responsible sourcing? So on this part, I know Sudhish has a 3-slide presentation that he wants to share with us. So please go ahead with that, Sudhish, to show us your view on the risks in the dore supply chain so far as responsible sourcing is concerned. And then based on that, I'm going to come back again from the IFSCA part and then to the refiners over here. What is their take on this now new potential opportunity or not of doing business of refining in IFSCA versus the local space? Does that change things materially for them? Sudhish.
Just quickly, initially I wanted to talk about the history on due diligence guidelines, but I'm skipping this, keeping time in essence. See, what I want to highlight here is about the risk that's elevated post-COVID. So, the increase in the number of mining areas that are affected by conflict and political unrest. What you see here is the data as by Fragile States Index, and the dark red and for the lighter shades. Those are primary indicators on how these risks have increased in these regions, and this is where we have been primarily sourcing from. Further, this is about the events related to violent extremist organizations who have been operating in these areas. Look at the sharp increase post-COVID. Further, I'm adding to this the armed conflict location and event data project that gives out further information on how these conflict areas, which are, again, look at it, all these are major mining areas from where the supplies goes to India, UAE, various other refining regions. And it's all getting escalated over the last 2 years, and it's further. And you start looking at the OFAC list, you start looking at the OFAC list when I say this, the number of organizations, the individuals coming under sanctions has increased significantly over these last one to 2 years. And the risk that gets passed down to the financial institutions due to these are quite significant. When I talking here, I need to impress upon the transaction that keeps happening, wherein, like, for instance, a Dore importer, they import and then make the payment across. There's hardly any due diligence check that is done by the bank about to whom the payment is done across. It's typically routed through the Dubai market and goes to the miner in terms of cash, but who the eventual beneficiary is. These are all the increased risks, and this risk has elevated significantly over the last 2 years, and it is the financial institution, the financial regulator, who needs to start looking at it in a more serious way about what are the broader implications that it can have on the banks who are making these payments for these refiners. So, taking these risks into concern is where a good example that I want to share with you is the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals. They signed up in 2018, 2017 they brought in the law, came into effect in 2021, whereby they mandated that all the tech companies or the institutions who are all buying precious metals, they all source it responsibly. Now, and to take that initiative further, what they started looking at is they started financing various projects on this front, where they work closely with the refiners or the refinery associations. They work with the response sourcing programs working on ground in these artisan mining areas, small-scale mining areas. And together, they start bringing integrity in the complete sourcing supply, in this complete supply chain. This is one of the solutions that one has to start working towards too. Even if we're not having a due diligence guidance in place, or a country doesn't have a due diligence guidance in place, at least an initiative from the refinery associations on this front is quite an important step. And this is what I primarily want to highlight in my presentation on.
Thanks, Sudesh, for that very nice exposition of some of the issues in responsible sourcing. So let me now come back to the refiners over here, and then I will circle back to IFSCA again. So let's start in the reverse order this time, from Vasubhai and then James and Vikas. Go ahead, please. Do you think this will work? Or this is all, big talk from OECD in Paris?
सर, इंडिया को अभी भी शायद और 10-15 साल लगेंगे, क्योंकि जिस हिसाब से यहाँ पे रिफाइनरी का जो सेटअप लगा हुआ है, उसमें बेसिकली माइंडसेट लोगों का अभी जस्ट मैं अर्जुन राघवेंद्र साहब से बात कर रहा था जो हमारे साथ बैठे हुए हैं, तो एक ही चर्चा है कि वो AGRM के भी कंसल्टेंट हैं। तो बेसिकली क्या है कि हर एक का माइंडसेट अलग है। किसी को बिजनेस करना है, किसी को बिजनेस करने का दिखावा करना है, किसी को ऐसा है कि हमको कोई रेगुलेशंस नहीं चाहिए, सारे नियम तोड़ दो तो वो एंगल से भी काम करना है। तो ये चीज़ें क्या होती है कि आप प्राइमरी स्कूल में पढ़ते हो तब तक ठीक है, पर जब ही सेकेंडरी स्कूल में जाते हो या हाई स्कूल में जाते हो तो रेगुलेशंस, टाइम्स, एग्ज़ाम्स जो भी रहते हैं वो देने पड़ते हैं और ये सब पास भी करना पड़ता है। तो अगर इंडस्ट्रीज़, अगर DGFT, इसमें हम कमेंट कर सकते हैं कि अगर DGFT कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें बनाए कि OECD के साथ बैठ के या IGPC के साथ बैठ के, क्योंकि सुदीश ने बहुत होमवर्क किया था जब भी वो IGPC में थे, तो OECD के साथ मिलके हम इसको वर्ल्ड गोल्ड काउंसिल का भी हेल्प ले सकते हैं और BIS के साथ रख के इसको वापस से एक पूरा सेट करना पड़ेगा, एक बैकग्राउंड। तो हम इसमें आगे जाके गवर्नमेंट से कुछ इंसेंटिव भी मांग सकेंगे या कुछ उससे कुछ हम देंगे, क्योंकि हमारी तरफ से एक देने के लिए क्या है, एक यूनिफॉर्म है कि हम ये प्रॉपर वे से, ये गाइडलाइन से, ये लाइन ऑफ एक्शन से काम करेंगे, तभी वो लोग हमको कुछ इंसेंटिव बढ़ा के देंगे या हमको उससे बेनिफिट मिलेगा। मगर उसमें भी क्या है कि 5 लोग करेंगे और 25 लोग नहीं करेंगे, तो वो दिक्कतें हर जगह मौजूद है। तो मेरे हिसाब से हम तो स्टार्ट कर चुके हैं, अभी बाकी के लोगों की बात है। विल सी अदर थिंग्स सर। थैंक
I just
यू।
want to add here.
Please.
देखिए उसमें 10-15 साल तक वेट करेंगे तो we are going to lose out quite a big way. The reason is दुनिया में world over people are shifting towards response sourcing. That's
Yeah.
very clear. A country like UAE, whose largest trade share comes from gold, has taken this bold step going forward, mandating response sourcing. Should be a step forward for us to go in that direction. The reason is simple. What happens if UAE also stops? It's not going to Europe. It's not going to any other country. Which are the other countries where it can go to? It's India. So are we going to be the place where everything is going to be junked? Let's not create an opportunity like that, because nobody is asking a question from where the gold is coming from. Let's not get there. The reason why we need to act fast.
And in fact, just to build on these two last points which were made, and to the earlier point where the suggestion was made, an SRO and so on. But till the time that the industry can come together, and if that time span is too long, then we may be a little bit late to the party, which then puts a higher onus of action on the regulator like IFSCA or parts of the government like Department of Commerce and Ministry of Finance, which is where I think IFSCA is actually in a unique position, because it can write some rules from ground zero. There is no template over there. And because the government and other regulators tend to work from precedents, a lot by precedents, my submission to you in particular, but the rest of the panel also would be, that it also makes sense simultaneously, apart from trying to bring together the industry on a common platform, for the government also to take, and the regulators to take a stance that this is what we can do to help the people who actually want to move to responsible sourcing more quickly. So there is a distinct penalty for not being on the responsible sourcing, and it has to be a level at which it makes a meaningful difference to the guy who's otherwise, it doesn't really matter. So if I make that observation, what would be the response of James and Vikas, and then we'll come back to Mr. Sharma again.
I would like to put it that, see, the transition to responsible sourcing adherence, the guidelines, is gradually moving in the right direction. I would say at least 5 or 6 refineries in the country are compliant with our responsible sourcing guidelines. And we are going to see a huge change once the domestic spot exchange starts picking up volumes. Because the three commodity exchanges, they are empaneling the refiners. So as part of their empanelment guideline, one is the responsible sourcing guidelines. Whether it's from domestic sources or from DORE, the empaneled refiner has to be a responsibly sourcing party. So that's going to make a huge change. At the moment, we have the good delivery guidelines published by BAS, but responsible sourcing is not part of the BAS guidelines. It's purely technical. The technical parameters, size, and all these things. And there is no regulatory authority, there is no monitoring agency to do just like LBMA, what we have abroad. We don't have a monitoring regulatory authority. These three exchanges have set up their own mechanism for empaneling the refineries. And it's really heartening to learn that Gift City, they are also coming out with their own guidelines for responsible sourcing. So what I believe is that once these 3-4 agencies are having their strict guidelines on responsible sourcing for empaneling the refiners, at least 5 or 10 refiners will come up with all those compliances. And when the volumes start picking up in the domestic spot exchanges, definitely the other smaller refineries will be motivated and compelled to follow the mainstream. That's my take on that.
Vikasji?
Yeah, certainly. I think you've asked some very nice questions.
That's one of the perks of being a professor, right?
But I must say they're very nice, very, very apt. Three points here. I think one is being socially, environmentally, ethically responsible has to be a part of your DNA. So therefore, responsible sourcing, clearly, we would very, very firmly endorse. I think LBMA is extremely demanding from that point of view. So you have to, adhere to the highest of standards on that account. However, I think to keep the larger industry in mind, it's important to also see what are the barriers typically and what's the cost, and therefore what's therefore the price that the business pays for something like that. So I think these are conversations because you cannot, for someone who is possibly not adhering or has some challenges, there has to be a transition to move from step A to step B, and I think that's a conversation which is also warranted. The piece I'd add on to responsible sourcing actually is ESG. So, at MMTC PAMP and at our group MKS PAMP, we have now already taken steps on ESG. We measured our carbon footprint. We have already decided by 2030, as per the Glasgow protocols, we would look at a 1.5 degrees reduction in terms of our carbon footprint, the temperature, and therefore the carbon footprint accordingly. That also comes at a cost. We are willing to put that money on the table because we want to be adhering to the highest of standards on just about everything. So there again, the government needs to be thinking about, there is a lot happening there, but then again, how do you kind of support the larger industry to get in that direction? The third piece, I think, extremely important, and that's really where Kamleshji and his team come in, is I think the IIBX and the spot exchange are ultra powerful moves that have been taken by the government. And we have not harnessed the potential that they offer this country. So, what is your playing field? Is your playing field India, or is your playing field the world? If you got the efficiencies, the enterprise, the innovation, the resources, the talent, the technology that you have in this country, why are we not harnessing it quickly, efficiently to be able to tap that huge market? So for example, if India is consuming 700 tons a year, the world consumes 4,000 tons a year. If we sell whatever we sell in terms of a minting and bullion portfolio, the global consumption of minting and bullion is 1,000 tons per annum. Why are we confined to this microcosm and saying that, listen, I will play in this and I will ensure he doesn't come in and he doesn't go out and only that will happen here and he gets an extra benefit and all? No. Define it in a manner that country wins, industry wins, and then, the plans will follow. It's like that old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I think the new saying is, adversity is really the mother of, innovation. And that's the direction that we need to be moving in. So I think the level at which this conversation moves needs to move many notches up.
Kamleshji?
Yes, because as summed up by Mr. Vikas, let's come back to this, the points which Mr. Harish also, Vasubhai also made. Are we looking at this industry, the gold refining industry, or if you want to broaden it to say cover other precious metals refining or whatever value addition happens here, if this is to be seen as a critical industry that needs to be regulated in a more structured manner, then it becomes a regulated industry. Then there have to be licensing norms. Then we can look at even, and then the emphasis on data and research, in which IGPC is also doing excellent work. Now, what is the universe of refining industry today? And what is the range of, say, what is the capacity utilization? What is the profile of the promoters? Who are the players interested? Once we have that data in place, then there is though SRO may take some time, but I think at least for IFSCA, what is easy is, of course, IFSCA, the other laws are actually applicable. The other laws of the land remain applicable unless we seek exemption. So if we talk of IFSC, of course, as the professor told, the advantage is that we can start with a clean slate. So we can come up with the licensing norms if you're setting up a refinery in IFSC. IFSC good delivery or the responsible sourcing norms will be applicable from day one. We have our supervisory mechanism, and it's easier, of course, for a small area, for a new industry. So, but then does that serve the purpose, as Mr. Vikas was telling? Because India is the Indian economy, the India growth story. So, from the IFSCA point of view, it is perhaps easier to bring out the norms. Anyways, as the IIBX potential has to be tapped fully, we want to actually go in for allowing the two-way trade. So once the refinery ecosystem develops, then we'll allow these norms which are up to the same standards as LBMA or anyone. That's what we aspire for, and there's no reason. So the export starts happening, maybe the policymakers or people in the revenue side, they will be also okay that, okay, it's not only about import of gold, everything I do to reduce the duty, it will be seen as, okay, what happens to my CAD? And that has the connotations, and where perhaps the Reserve Bank also may be looking at, okay, let's look at it, whether it is, we can do that. So we are looking to bring out those norms for the IFSC, and IFSCA, whatever the tax benefits are offered. So that is anyway an incentive.
But you know, if I'm a large refiner based out of Switzerland, why would I want to come to IFSCA, Gift City? Why would I want to come to Gift City?
Right.
What is my business case?
Right.
If I already have an ecosystem that is there in Switzerland or in UK or in America, what is my business case to come to Gift City?
Right. So let's start with that. Because Gift City is part of India, it is handshaking distance from that big Indian market. The chairperson IFSC was talking about our position. That imminence we get is again from the demand and consumption. So demand is here, and demand is only going to grow from the previous panel also. So if everything else that is getting attracted to India, the same answer should apply, and the same logic should apply for even gold refining to come to India.
Not necessarily. I could probably push back a little and say that if I'm a large refiner that's based out of Switzerland or UK, and I already have a large operation over there, my ecosystem is in place in terms of responsible sourcing, in terms of refining operations, in terms of the network of trust that I need to have to be able to do good solid refining. And so what is the motivation for me to put in a certain amount of money, especially if I already have an existing refinery, or if I'm an existing refinery within the country, and I want to incentivize other refiners operating within the country to now set up something in the international space. There has to be a clear business case.
Right.
Now, the business case, given the differential in the duty structure that we have now, I could probably do a quick back of the envelope calculation and say the business case is stronger for someone who is local to set up, because then I don't have. But then I am running into an issue of I have an existing business to take care of, and how do I manage the transition if I want to do it? So even though the business case is there, the implementation issues may not be non-trivial. They are strong enough for me to have some hesitation. Whereas for the large maker from outside, refiner from outside, one could make the case that actually the business case is somewhat weak. So both ways, there seem to be an issue of a refiner of some scale coming, which would be interesting to me, because if the Gift City as an idea and gold bullion trading as an idea has to get some scale, then without refiners in situ, I will not get the kind of scale that is possible. I will still get some scale, but to have really large scale, getting a refiner or a bunch of refiners over there will really add scale. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. That's a wonderful question in the sense that you are putting it across that, okay, what is my incentive? What is the incentive for a refiner to actually set up a greenfield project? Now, I'm liking the question because actually this is not a regulatory question. Anyway, this should be answered from the industry with what is the competitive advantage. But I'm not concerned sitting in IFSC because IIBX will be happy to get the supply or the sale even from the domestic side.
I agree.
So that's why it's better to have that holistic picture. Your question is actually strengthening the case that it needs to be addressed at that level. So this duty structure part, now the industry also has to ask this question that are they going to only focus on this 1% duty difference play? Now SEPA completely changes the equation. Right, now they completely go out of the business. I think there are already some representations. The government has asked for IFSCA's comments as well. We are deliberating on it very, very closely. And we want to actually, as a response itself, we wanted to, in fact, a lot of learnings from this discussion itself, that it should be giving out a signal that it is not the question of that, okay, whether you want to levy the duty on DORE on invoice value and you continue to do it for that tariff 15 days tariff rates. So you just address the whole thing. But for the purpose of IFSC and leveraging upon the IIBX experiment, that is actually not that different. And I would also want the industry also should go deeper into the feasibility part, that the tax structures and other benefits of moving into GIFT IFSC, whether they are attractive enough for refining to move, because just because we have an IFSC, not everything has to be done out of there itself. So it will perhaps come from the industry. But as far as IFSCA, the potential part is concerned, like MCX, when MCX will also be coming out with, they're already accepting, say, India refinery good delivery norms on BIS. So that's a good thing. Now, are we looking at the situation where the domestically, okay, these refineries can do only domestically, but when you want to come to export side, then we will be, these refineries will be subject to that. So that is where I believe that once we organize ourselves better, once we know the type of players and industry structure, and then the regulation should actually be supportive. There is no reason.
I will make some remarks on that closing comment, but yeah, I wanted both Vasubhai and Vikas Singh to kind of take a quick shot at it. Yeah.
सर जस्ट IFSC के रिफाइनरी के लिए हम लोगों ने भी एप्लीकेशन दिया हुआ है, तो उसके लिए मैं बताना चाहता हूँ कि क्या क्या बेनिफिट है IFSC के अंदर करने का। एक तो सबसे बड़ा बेनिफिट है कि वहाँ पे हमको डॉलर फंडिंग मिलता है जिसका इंटरेस्ट कॉस्ट कम रहता है। सेकंड बेनिफिट है कि 15 साल में से 10 साल टैक्स बेनिफिट दिया हुआ है IFSC ने कि जिसमें नो इनकम टैक्स है। फिर 10 साल के बाद जो होता है उसमें 9% MAT करके हमको लगता है, तो ये सेकंड बेनिफिट है। थर्ड बेनिफिट ये है कि हम जो गुड्स मंगवा रहे हैं उसके ऊपर हमको ना कस्टम ड्यूटी ना GST पे करना पड़ता है, या हम वहाँ से ही एक फ्री जोन टू एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, लाइक तुर्की, हांगकांग, चाइना, जहाँ पे भी करना है वो हम कर सकते हैं। चौथा चीज़ ये है कि अभी हम सिर्फ DGFT हमको सिर्फ डोरे का लाइसेंस दे रहा है, हम यहाँ पे गोल्ड कॉन्सेंट्रेट भी मंगवा सकते हैं, गोल्ड स्क्रैप भी मंगवा सकते हैं, यानी गोल्ड के अलग अलग कंटेंट्स भी हम उसमें रिफाइन कर सकते हैं। तो देयर आर टू मेनी ऑप्शंस आर देयर। और अपॉर्चुनिटी क्या है कि आज हम लोग वहाँ पे रिफाइनरी करने के लिए जा रहे हैं, तो हम ऐसा सोचेंगे कि हम 0.65 के लिए डोमेस्टिक जोन में करेंगे और ज़ीरो बेनिफिट के लिए फ्री जोन में कर रहे हैं, तो लोगों को लग रहा है कि ये पागल बंदा है, ये क्यों कर रहा है। पर बेसिकली कुछ विज़न है कि ये आगे जाके इसका, और यहाँ से हम क्या करेंगे कि अगर हम यहाँ से LBMA रिफाइनर्स जैसे हैं कि आज LBMA रिफाइनर्स तुर्की में डिलीवरी कर सकते हैं, मेरे ख्याल से हांगकांग में भी, शंघाई गोल्ड एक्सचेंज में भी डिलीवरी कर सकते हैं, तो हम यहाँ से ग्लोबली बिजनेस का भी व्यू ले सकते हैं। इवन इंडिया तो मार्केट है अपने पास, पर यहाँ से हम ग्लोबल व्यू भी ले सकते हैं। इसीलिए IFSC इज अ बेटर ऑप्शन फॉर दैट।
विकास जी।
Yeah, so actually this reminds me of your first question, what keeps me awake at night? So,
we are back to the square one.
It's a full circle, yeah. Uh, Firstly, just saying, an incentive for a new initiative should not become a disincentive for the huge ecosystem that already exists. Unfortunately, we tend to take these decisions which are, from a very limited perspective, and then, there's a lot of screaming and shouting and, pain which is, caused as a result of that. So that's the first principle. So now, whether the refinery is in IFSCA or is it outside anywhere, I think that's the next question. Now, if I were to wear the business hat, the group is making investments across the world. We are into heavy acquisition in the US. We are looking into acquisitions or greenfields in other countries without taking names. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Why not in IPS? Why not in GIFT
Exactly.
City?
So now the question is, if you don't have that certainty, or if you don't have that visibility, and if I have that capacity already existing in India, and I am in a volatile, environment for, reasons which are controllable, why would another investment be made? So maybe everyone is doing exactly like you said, a business case, and deciding where should that money actually move. Now, if we are able to give a predictable environment without disincentives on one side with the, while incentivizing another, I mean, I'd say inadvertently or accidentally, whatever the case may be, the flow of capital into India will always be a little, what do you call it?
Yep.
It'll be a little difficult. So I think, these are the pieces we need to think. If there is an ability, if you have a capacity in the country which is way above what the country needs, but you define your footprint as way beyond India, then definitely the investment will come.
100%, 100%. So I know we are keeping people from lunch. I'm pretty sure we could continue this conversation for quite long. So I just want to make one final observation, which is to do with the fact that for IIBX, for example, IFSCA as a regulator actually has taken quite a few steps in the background to be able to solve for some of the ecosystem related issues that are going to help IIBX to scale. Some of those issues were perhaps anticipated, some of them, like any project, come up as we go along, and one is addressing. So to the extent that there is clarity in the thinking of the regulator as to the role of the refining process, and to get both local refiners who have the vision and the ambition, as well as outsiders who, for large MNC in the refining business or otherwise, who want to come, then just like IFSCA has taken a stance on IIBX, probably IFSCA would also be would need to take an a priori stance on this as well, to be able to make the entire process a little more efficient. It will happen, but the question, as Sudhish raised, was 10, 15 years is too long. We needed to do it in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And now actually we are at a stage where one could argue that IFSCA has the critical mass of expertise, people like yourself, Ramki, and the team that many of whom I have met, to be able to actually move that process. And at IGPC, we are always there to be able to provide as much support if possible to do that in consultation with industry, so that we are able to also share the viewpoint of the industry. It has to be a balancing act. It cannot just be what the industry wants, it cannot just be what the regulator wants, it cannot just be what somebody else wants, but what ultimately is good for the growth of the entire industry. So even the refining piece of the puzzle would need to take into account the jewelers, would need to take into account bullion traders. And when we have an ecosystem view, then perhaps I think we'll all end up in a better place. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to be formal now. Mr. Nambiar, Mr. Acharya, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Singh, Mr. Jose. Thank you very much.